Rhea always felt like she had a place in her own home, but when it came to family events, especially those involving Rishi's side of the family, she was never quite sure. She had been married to Rishi for 7 years, and for the most part, everything had been smooth. But she knew there was a difference. Rishi's family was close-knit, and even though they included her in things, she never felt like she truly belonged. When the invitation for Priya's wedding arrived, Rhea had mixed feelings. It wasn't that she didn't love weddings, she did. It was the perfect excuse to dress up, enjoy good food, and have fun. But every time she found herself in Rishi's family circle, she felt out of place. Priya was his cousin, a vibrant, confident woman who had been the center of attention at every family gathering. And Rhea? Well, she was always just there. Helping with arrangements, chatting politely, and blending into the background. It wasn't that she hated being part of the support system for her husband's family, it was just exhausting always being in the background, unnoticed. Rishi, the golden child in his family, had grown up with this unspoken pressure to maintain a perfect image. His relationship with his parents was one of those polished, idealistic bonds where everything seemed harmonious on the surface. But Rhea knew, deep down, that things weren't always as perfect as they appeared. The wedding day itself arrived, and as usual, Rhea threw herself into the duties she had come to expect of herself. She helped coordinate last-minute decorations, ran errands, and ensured everything was running smoothly. She did it with a smile, but underneath it, there was a simmering sense of dissatisfaction. She often felt like she was the one holding everything together while Rishi coasted along in his family's comfort, never questioning their treatment of her. The reception was a lively one, filled with chatter and laughter. Priya was glowing in her wedding gown, and Rhea couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy. But not in the way you'd expect. Rhea wasn't envious of Priya's beauty or her perfect life. What bothered her was the fact that it seemed like Priya always had her place. Always at the center of attention, always supported by the family. Rhea couldn't remember the last time anyone in Rishi's family truly saw her. Not the way they saw Priya, or even Rishi. The turning point came during the reception when Rhea was helping serve drinks to the guests. She was moving between tables, making sure people had everything they needed, when she overheard a loud voice calling out from across the room. "Look at Rhea, always playing the maid." Meena, Rishi's mother, said with a cackle. The words hit Rhea like a cold slap. She froze in her tracks, her heart racing in her chest. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Meena's voice was sharp and mocking, loud enough for the entire table to hear. Rhea glanced at the group, hoping someone would stand up for her, maybe Rishi. But when she looked at him, she saw a slight smile on his face, as though he thought his mother's words were just a funny quip. Rhea's face flushed with embarrassment, the sting of the insult sharp against the noise of the reception. She forced herself to continue walking, but the words rang in her ears, getting louder with each step she took. Always playing the maid. She had heard similar remarks before, but this was different. There was something so deliberate in Meena's tone, something that made Rhea feel like an outsider, like she didn't belong in the family, and never would. And the worst part was that Rishi didn't say a word. He didn't defend her, didn't tell his mother to stop, didn't even acknowledge the insult. Instead, he laughed along with the others, as though Meena's words were harmless and light-hearted. The laughter echoed around her, but to Rhea, it was the sound of everything crashing down. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Rhea played her part, smiling, laughing, and serving drinks. But inside, she felt empty, drained, and utterly alone. She kept trying to brush it off, to tell herself that it was just a one-time comment, but it gnawed at her, the way Meena's words lingered long after they were spoken. When they finally left the reception and got into the car, the silence between her and Rishi felt like a physical presence. Rhea stared out the window, unable to find the words to express what she was feeling. She couldn't shake the humiliation. The anger. The sadness. All of it swirled inside her, but she couldn't get the words out. Rishi, on the other hand, was silent too, his focus entirely on the road. The quiet in the car was deafening. Rhea couldn't help but feel the distance between them. She was no longer the carefree wife she used to be. She was someone else now, someone who had been hurt by the very people she had tried so hard to fit in with. When they finally arrived back at their hotel, Rhea was tired, physically, emotionally, and mentally. She felt drained from the effort of pretending everything was okay. But the reality was different. Everything was far from okay. Rishi barely glanced at her as they entered the room. He went straight for the bathroom, closing the door behind him without a word. Rhea stood in the middle of the room, feeling completely disconnected from everything and everyone around her. For the first time in years, she felt like she didn't even know who she was anymore. Rhea tried to shake it off, but the more she thought about it, the more the hurt crept in. It wasn't just Mina's comment that bothered her, it was Rishi's complete disregard for how she felt. It was his silence. It was his complicity in the way his family treated her. She wanted to cry, to scream, to demand answers. But all she could do was sit there in the dark, alone with her thoughts, wondering if she had ever really mattered to anyone at all. The next few days passed in a haze of numbness. Rhea tried to act like everything was fine, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being invisible. It wasn't just the incident with Mina that lingered in her mind, it was the entire dynamic with Rishi's family. The subtle dismissals, the passive-aggressive comments, the way they treated her like she was just another guest rather than a part of the family. She had been silent for so long, playing the part of the dutiful wife, but something inside her had broken. She couldn't keep pretending. When Rhea arrived home from work one evening, she found Rishi sitting on the couch, flipping through his phone. She stood in the doorway, watching him for a moment before speaking. "Rishi, we need to talk." Rishi glanced up, his face blank. "About what?" His tone was casual, dismissive even, as though he didn't have a clue what was coming. "I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this," Rhea said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. The words felt heavy, as though saying them out loud would make everything real. Rishi raised an eyebrow, but his attention quickly returned to his phone. "What do you mean?" Rhea's chest tightened. It wasn't the first time she'd tried to talk about her feelings, but it was the first time she felt like the words mattered. She took a deep breath before continuing. "The way your family treats me. The way you treat me around them. I can't keep pretending it doesn't hurt." Rishi put his phone down and looked at her, but there was no understanding in his eyes, just confusion. "What are you talking about? You're being dramatic again." The word dramatic stung. It always did, but today it felt like the last straw. Rhea felt a surge of anger rise within her, but she swallowed it down. She had tried for so long to be understanding, to stay quiet, to make things work. But now, it was like a dam had broken, and there was no stopping the flood. "I'm not being dramatic, Rishi. Your mom called me a maid at the wedding, and you just sat there and laughed. Do you even realize how humiliating that was?" Rhea's voice cracked as she spoke. "I've spent years trying to fit in, trying to be a part of your family, and you just stand by and let them treat me like that." Rishi sat up straighter, his expression hardening. "It's not like that. You're making a big deal out of nothing. My family doesn't mean anything by it." Rhea felt a wave of disbelief wash over her. She couldn't believe he was still defending them. Couldn't believe that he couldn't see what was so painfully clear to her. "No, Rishi, it's not nothing," she said, her voice rising. "It's not just your mom. It's everyone. They've treated me like I'm invisible for years, like I don't matter, and you never say a word. Why is it so hard for you to stand up for me? I'm your wife, Rishi. Why don't you care about how they treat me?" Rishi's jaw clenched. "You're being ridiculous. They love you. You're just too sensitive." Rhea shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm not too sensitive. I'm just tired of being ignored, of being the last priority in your life. I'm tired of pretending everything's fine when it's not." The silence between them grew thick. Rishi's eyes were cold now, and for the first time in years, Rhea felt like they were strangers. She had been holding on to this relationship with everything she had, but now, it was like a thread was unraveling, and she couldn't find the strength to hold it together anymore. She wiped her eyes, angry at herself for crying. "I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this. Maybe I should just go. Maybe that's what I need. To stop pretending." Rishi stood up, his face darkening with frustration. "What, you're just going to leave? Because of a few words from my mom? This is ridiculous, Rhea." Rhea could feel her heart racing, but she didn't back down. "I'm not leaving because of a few words. I'm leaving because I can't live like this anymore. I need more than just being tolerated in your family. I need to be seen, to be heard. And if you can't give me that, then I don't know if this is something I can keep doing." Rishi's face twisted in anger. "So, what? You think you can just walk away from our marriage because of this? That's not how it works, Rhea." Rhea took a step back, her hands trembling. She didn't know if she was ready to walk away yet, but she couldn't ignore the emptiness that had been growing inside her for so long. She needed him to see her. She needed him to understand her pain. "I'm not saying I'm leaving, Rishi. But I need something from you. I need you to stand by me. To see me the way I see you. And if you can't do that, then I don't know how much longer I can stay. Rishi stared at her, his expression hard, but there was no warmth in his eyes anymore. Rhea knew then that the man she had married was no longer the person she thought he was. He wasn't the man who had promised to always be by her side, to protect her from the world. He had become someone else, someone who was willing to let her fade into the background, just like his family did. I need time to think, Rishi said curtly before walking away, disappearing into a hallway. Rhea stood there for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. She had said what she needed to say, but a feeling of dread hung over her. She wasn't sure if anything would change. She wasn't sure if anything ever would. As she sat down on the couch, her thoughts spiraled. She had given everything to this marriage, to this family, and yet, she felt more alone than ever. It wasn't just the insult at the wedding. It was the years of quiet hurt, the endless moments where she had tried so hard to fit in, only to be met with indifference. She had sacrificed parts of herself for this life, and now, it felt like she had nothing left. Could she really keep living like this? Could she keep sacrificing her happiness for a relationship that seemed to be crumbling right before her eyes? The uncertainty gripped her heart. And as the evening stretched on, Rhea realized something she hadn't fully understood before: she couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. She needed change, whether that came from Rishi or from within herself. The days after that conversation felt like a slow burn. Rishi hadn't spoken much to her, and when he did, it was always about trivial things, like what time dinner was or whether she'd seen the new show on Netflix. It was as if the conversation they'd had hadn't even happened. Rhea felt the silence like a heavy weight pressing down on her chest. She had expected Rishi to come around, to try and fix things. But it seemed like he was either too proud or too indifferent to do anything. The coldness in their home was suffocating, and Rhea wasn't sure how much longer she could endure it. One evening, after a long day at work, Rhea came home to find Rishi sitting on the couch, his eyes glued to his phone. She stood in the doorway, hesitant. She hadn't spoken to him about the conversation in days, but the words were building inside her, threatening to spill over. She couldn't hold it in anymore. "Rishi, we need to talk," she said quietly, her voice firm despite the tremor in her chest. He didn't look up. "About what?" His tone was flat, dismissive. "About everything," Rhea replied, stepping into the room. "About us. About your family. About how I feel invisible in this relationship." Rishi finally looked at her, but there was no warmth in his eyes, just a cold, distant stare. He sighed, like this was all too much to deal with. "Rhea, we've already talked about this. I don't know what you want me to say." Rhea's heart thudded painfully in her chest. She had given him so many chances to show her he cared, but it was as if he wasn't even trying anymore. He was content to let her carry all the weight, to let the silence grow between them like a chasm that neither of them knew how to cross. "I want you to see me," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "I want you to see me, Rishi. Not just as your wife, but as a person, as someone who is struggling. I need you to care. I can't keep doing this alone." Rishi stood up slowly, the tension in his body palpable. He didn't seem angry, but something in his posture made Rhea feel like she was about to be dismissed yet again. "I care, Rhea. I'm just tired of this. Every time we have a conversation, it turns into this huge ordeal. I don't know what you want me to do. My family is my family. They're not going to change, and I'm not going to pick a fight with them over something so small." Rhea's heart sank. "It's not small to me, Rishi. It's my life. It's my dignity. And I'm done pretending it doesn't matter." The words hung in the air between them like a final plea, but Rishi didn't seem moved. Instead, he crossed his arms, leaning against the wall. "I don't understand why you're making such a big deal out of this. It's not like they meant any harm. They're just like that." Rhea stared at him, feeling a growing sense of disbelief. "That's the problem, Rishi. They don't care. And neither do you." Rishi looked away, his face hardening. "This is ridiculous. You're making me choose between you and my family. And I'm not going to do that. You're my wife, yes, but my family comes first." Rhea's eyes burned with unshed tears, but she held them back. "I never asked you to choose, Rishi. I just asked you to stand by me, to show me that you care. But instead, you've chosen them over me, over our marriage. And I can't keep pretending like it doesn't hurt." Rishi didn't respond. He just stood there, silent, and for a moment, Rhea wondered if he even cared enough to try. She had tried for so long to make this work, to fit into a life that felt increasingly alien to her, but now, she realized that she couldn't keep bending herself into something she wasn't. Maybe this is it, Rishi, Rhea said softly, her voice barely a whisper. Maybe this is the end. The words hung in the air, a final admission of what had been building for months. Rhea wasn't sure if she was ready to walk away, but she knew she couldn't keep living in this painful limbo. She needed to be seen, to be heard. And if Rishi couldn't offer that, then she wasn't sure how much longer she could stay. For the first time in a long while, she didn't wait for Rishi's response. She turned and walked out of the living room, heading toward their bedroom. The distance between them felt like a physical barrier now, something that couldn't be bridged by words or apologies. She closed the door behind her, the weight of the decision pressing down on her shoulders. As Rhea lay in bed that night, she stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. She had never imagined that her marriage would come to this point, where she felt like a stranger in her own home, where her voice was drowned out by silence. But now, she knew what she had to do. She couldn't keep sacrificing her happiness for a relationship that was built on the fragile foundation of expectations and unspoken resentment. The path forward wasn't clear. She didn't know if walking away was the right decision, but one thing was certain, she couldn't keep living like this. She couldn't keep pretending. Rhea woke up the next morning feeling like she had barely slept. The room was dark, and the silence was deafening. Rishi hadn't come to bed the night before, and the absence of his presence in their shared space felt like a cold reminder of everything that was wrong. Rhea stared at the ceiling, her mind swirling with the remnants of the conversation they had the night before. The words that were left unsaid still echoed in her head. She had tried so hard to make it work, to bridge the growing gap between them, but it was as if no matter what she did, the distance only widened. She knew she needed to make a decision. She couldn't keep living in this limbo, unable to move forward or back. She had already sacrificed too much of herself. As Rhea got out of bed and started getting ready for work, she heard the familiar sounds of Rishi's footsteps outside the bedroom door. The house was so quiet that even the smallest noises seemed magnified. He didn't knock before entering, something that had become a habit over the years, but today, the intrusion felt different, like a reminder of the unspoken tension between them. "Rhea, can we talk?" His voice was hesitant, quieter than usual, and she knew this wasn't going to be another one of their typical arguments. She nodded, even though she felt like her heart was already breaking. She wasn't sure if she was ready to hear what he had to say, but she knew it was time. They couldn't keep avoiding it. Rishi stepped into the room, looking worn and tired. His usual confident demeanor was gone, replaced by something unfamiliar, vulnerability. It caught Rhea off guard, and for a moment, she wondered if this was the Rishi she had fallen in love with, the one who had always been her rock, her partner. The man who had promised her forever. But she had learned the hard way that promises meant nothing without effort. He sat down on the edge of the bed, his hands resting in his lap. "Rhea," he began, his voice soft. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said last night. About how I've been absent, how I've let things slide." He paused, his eyes searching hers. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize how bad it had gotten, and I know I've hurt you. I didn't mean to. But I've been so focused on trying to keep everyone happy, I forgot about you. About us." Rhea's heart clenched, but she didn't speak. She had heard the words before, from other people in other situations. Words of regret, words of apology, but they were always followed by the same cycle of neglect. She didn't know if she could trust his words anymore. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Rishi continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "I just want you to know that I see you. I see everything you've done for me, for our life. I know I've taken you for granted, and I'm sorry." Rhea's breath caught in her throat. She had hoped, for so long, that he would come to this realization on his own, but now that it was happening, she wasn't sure it mattered. Was it too little, too late? "I don't know, Rishi," she replied, her voice trembling. "You say all the right things, but actions speak louder than words. And I need to see change, not just hear it." She paused, taking a deep breath. "I can't keep waiting for things to get better. I can't keep putting myself in a position where I'm always the one who's compromising, always the one who's giving." Rishi's face softened, and for the first time in a long while, Rhea saw the man she had married. "I understand. I really do. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this, Rhea. If you'll give me the chance." But Rhea wasn't sure anymore. The doubt that had been growing in her heart for months, years even, couldn't be erased with a few heartfelt words. She had lived with this uncertainty for so long, and she was afraid that if she kept waiting for him to change, she would lose herself completely. "I don't know if I can," Rhea said, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know if I can keep living like this, in this constant state of waiting, hoping that things will change. I've lost so much of myself trying to hold on to something that might not even be there anymore." Rishi looked at her with a mix of sadness and desperation. "I don't want to lose you, Rhea. You're everything to me. I know I've messed up, but I want to try. I'll do whatever it takes, if you'll give me the chance." The tears that Rhea had been holding back finally spilled over, but she wiped them away quickly, not wanting to show weakness. "You don't get it, do you?" she said, her voice breaking. "It's not just about you trying. It's about both of us, working together. And I don't think we're doing that anymore." Rishi reached out, placing his hand gently on hers. "I'm willing to try, Rhea. I'm willing to fight for us. Please don't give up on me." But Rhea wasn't sure if she could anymore. The weight of the decision was too much, and she felt like she was being pulled in two directions. She loved him, but was love enough when there was so much damage? When they had both ignored the cracks in their marriage for so long? She stared at his hand on hers, feeling both comforted and suffocated by it. "I don't know, Rishi. I just don't know." The days following their conversation felt like a blur. Rhea moved through her routine, going to work, managing the house, interacting with friends, but all of it seemed distant, as if she were watching her life unfold through a foggy window. Rishi had tried, in his way, to make amends. He sent her flowers, planned small dates, and even began to show more interest in the things that mattered to her. But despite his efforts, Rhea couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Something had already been lost. It wasn't just the small things anymore. It was everything. The love, the respect, the trust, they had all eroded over time, and no matter how many flowers or gestures of affection Rishi offered, it was clear to Rhea that they couldn't fix the cracks in their marriage. Rhea knew it wasn't fair to keep pretending everything was fine when she felt like her world had been turned upside down. She had spent so many years compromising, so many years thinking that her love for Rishi was enough to carry them through. But now, she was beginning to see the truth. Love wasn't enough to patch up the wounds they had both inflicted. It was Sunday morning when she made up her mind. The house was quiet, the early morning light streaming through the windows, casting a soft glow on the kitchen table where she sat, sipping her coffee. Rishi was in the living room, reading the newspaper, his familiar presence almost comforting in its predictability. But Rhea knew it was time to make a change. Time to stop waiting, stop hoping, and start living for herself again. She put down her cup, stood up, and walked into the living room where Rishi was. He looked up at her with a smile, but it faltered when he saw the serious expression on her face. "Rhea? What's wrong?" "I need to talk to you, Rishi," she said, her voice steady but heavy with emotion. "And I need you to really listen to me." He nodded, setting the newspaper aside and giving her his full attention. The air between them shifted, charged with the tension of an impending conversation they both knew would be hard. "I've been thinking a lot," Rhea began, her heart racing as she prepared to say the words that had been swirling in her mind for weeks. "About everything. About us. And I think I've finally come to a decision." Rishi's face tightened, and for a moment, she saw the flicker of fear in his eyes. "What do you mean? What decision?" "I don't think we can keep going like this," Rhea said, her voice cracking slightly. "I can't keep living in this in-between space, constantly wondering if things will ever get better. I've been waiting for you to change, for us to change, but we've been stuck in the same place for so long now. I don't think I can wait any longer." She paused, taking a deep breath as she looked him in the eyes, searching for the man she had once known, the man she had fallen in love with. But all she saw was the stranger they had become to each other. "I think it's time for us to let go, Rishi," she whispered. "I think it's time for me to let go." Rishi's face went pale, and for a moment, he didn't speak. The weight of her words hung in the air, suffocating them both. Rhea could see the disbelief in his eyes, but there was something else there, too, resignation. Deep down, he had known this was coming, even if he hadn't wanted to admit it. "I'm sorry," Rhea continued, her voice trembling now. "I wish things could be different, but I can't keep going through this. I can't keep sacrificing myself in the hope that you'll change. It's not fair to either of us." Rishi stood up abruptly, pacing the room in a way that reminded Rhea of their old arguments, the ones where neither of them would back down. But this time, she wasn't going to back down. "You're giving up on us?" Rishi asked, his voice strained, his words laced with disbelief. "After everything we've been through, you're just going to throw it all away?" "I'm not giving up on us," Rhea said softly, her eyes filled with tears she could no longer hold back. "I'm giving up on something that's already broken. You and I, Rishi, we've been broken for a long time. And no matter how hard we try to fix it, it won't be the same. It can't be." Rishi stood there in silence, looking at her, as if trying to absorb what she had just said. His shoulders slumped, and Rhea saw the pain on his face, the same pain she had felt for so long. She reached out to him then, taking his hand in hers, but there was no warmth in it anymore, no spark of the connection they had once shared. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears falling freely now. "I'm so sorry." For a long time, neither of them spoke. They just stood there, two people who had loved each other but were now standing at the end of their journey together. The reality of it all hit Rhea like a wave, and she felt a deep, aching sadness in her chest, but also a sense of relief. She had finally made the decision for herself, and it was the hardest, most painful thing she had ever done. "I don't want to lose you, Rhea," Rishi said, his voice barely a whisper. "But I know you're right. I've lost you already." "I know," she replied, her voice soft. "I know." And just like that, the decision was made. Rhea and Rishi stood in that living room for a few more moments, neither of them knowing what came next, but both knowing that this was the end of their story. Their paths were no longer the same, and it was time to walk away. As Rhea left the house that day, she felt the weight lift off her shoulders, and for the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe. It wasn't going to be easy, and the road ahead was uncertain, but she knew one thing for sure: she was finally free.